Yes, Vanessa Caracoza, and I am Deputy Executive Director for the Office of the City Commissioners with the City of Philadelphia.
Wonderful. So when people think about elections,
Mhm.
it's just around election day, but there's like so much work, that leads to that. What can you tell us a little bit about, sort of peeking behind the curtain, like what goes into an election?
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of people don't know that here in Philly we have elections about every 6 months, and basically we have to do the same things we do for each election, regardless of um, the participation we expect. We still need to make sure there are our polling locations are open on election day. We still need to make sure that mail-in ballots are available at satellite election offices. And we need to make sure that as much as possible that we're working with collaboratively with organizations to get out the word that we have an election coming up. So even though, you know, election every 6 months, there's a lot of preparation that goes, beforehand to make sure that we have a successful election. And I think one of the things that's really important to our department, to our city commissioners, is making sure there's voter access, making sure that our elections are safe, accurate, that people feel confident in the process so that they can participate.
So now let's, kind of start from the beginning. And how did you get into this work?
Yeah, so I will say this is being part of the Philadelphia City Commissioners now and having this role with voter access is really a full circle moment for me because 11 years ago I was in college trying to figure out what I was going to do with my career. I was a pre-med student, so very different than this. And I started getting involved by registering people to vote in predominantly Latino communities and really having those conversations around making sure that people knew their voice mattered, and if they were eligible to vote, that they should register, talking about issues in the community. So that really, sparked my interest in like public service. And shortly after that experience, I changed my major. I became a philosophy major, and then through that, I came across opportunities in political organizing. Um, and that really helped shape the direction of my career. That started in political organizing, nonprofit, and now government. And now getting to work with the Philadelphia City Commissioners. I always say like it's an honor to being able um, to have been involved in projects that have increased voter access for our communities, because we just care that you vote. It doesn't matter, what party affiliation. We just want our communities to participate in the process, right? So that we could see change that we want to see.
What was there a moment that you can think of that, was sort of that moment where you're like, this is what I want to do? Everything around public service.
Yeah, I think for me, it was when I was knocking on doors for Senator Wendy Davis. This was back in 2014 in Texas. She was running for governor. And I just remember just seeing the contrast between her and the other candidate as far as like issues that I cared about. And I just remember like, being a volunteer, then I ended up being an organizer for her. But really those conversations when I was like knocking on doors, didn't know if I was going to be greeted by a dog and having to, leave, or if it was going to be a positive conversation versus like a negative, I think even for me, when someone knocks on my door, I'm like, who is it, right? But what really was pivotal is just having those really good conversations about people, one, being grateful that they received the information or they didn't know an upcoming election was happening and they didn't know really what was on the ballot. So I think it wasn't one particular thing, but it was like a combination of doing that grassroots community engagement that really like gave me hope. And then I really like understood also that the way I grew up and like, my parents coming to this country from Mexico, the struggles that we had, being immigrants in this country, it was not a single story, right? I heard it over and over, like the issues that our community was facing. So it became not only a passion to serve my community, but also as a way of like also honoring like my roots and in my community, really.
You know the saying that you can't be what you can't see.
Mm-hmm.
Was there in your circle,
Mm-hmm.
in your, whether it's family or chosen
Yeah.
family or, in academia, professors, counselors, was there people that you looked up to who said like, hey, Vanessa, this is a career path for you? Or did you figure it out like many people?
Yeah, I just figured it out along the way. And I think I mentioned the pre-med story because like I feel like in Latino households, like sometimes the conversation around education, it's like you think about a doctor, you think about a lawyer, right? But there's just like so much more than that, right? Especially like, and I'm talking about like Latino households that like, for example, like my parents didn't go to college, right? So it's really about, what we see around us. But I think through my journey in college and just being open to what else was out there was really important in order for me to figure out my career. And I think I was really inspired, in particular in that campaign that I mentioned in Texas. And I remember we were planning, we call it a canvas, when we, gather volunteers to knock on doors. And Dolores Huertas was part of our guest speaker and sort of the person coming in to organize. And that was really amazing, getting to knock on doors with Dolores Huerta in San Antonio. And she's an amazing like civil rights activist. So I got to learn about her through that experience. And then also like, remember like after that also like buying some Cesar Chavez books. I could really understand the story and how he organized back then. So
So in terms of leadership, it sounds, from your experience that you've always been or, have an interest to lead.
mhm.
Was that something that you've always had in you? Or, they say like leadership is either born with it or you're not.
Yeah,
Or in some cases you can learn it.
yeah. I definitely feel like I was born with it. And it showed up in different ways. Like I was always the person in my family who would figure things out. If my parents needed help with something, needed to find, I don't know, a new doctor, needed to figure out like what the mail said when it came in, right? That my parents couldn't figure it out. I was always like, not because I was asked, I actually enjoyed like helping my parents. And then also even like my parents' friends would come to me for things. So I feel like I always had that in me. And also in high school, I didn't see, like I saw college not as an option. I saw it as like, no, this is my opportunity. Like growing up, I heard my dad tell me like, go to school, get an education. We want you to have a better like future. We know you're able to do it. We're going to support you. They didn't really know what that meant, but they just wanted to make sure to always say it to me, and they knew I was going to figure it out. So I think that throughout my college experience and even like having jobs, I've always strived to, or I always feel like I've taken like leadership roles, right? Sometimes without the title, right? That's how it is. You have to, work yourself from the ground up. And I've had, moments of leadership, like I mentioned, my organizing time in Texas, recruiting over 300 volunteers. That's not easy, right? You're asking people to volunteer their time, maybe on a Saturday, on a weeknight after work, and telling them like, hey, can you make calls? Hey, can you knock on doors? It's not easy. So I've definitely, I think, growing up, taking on those leadership opportunities, and then it kind of translated in my career of how I did things.
And you mentioned the importance of voter access. Tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing here in the city.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the another full circle moment. So in 2020, I was working for the managing director's office on census outreach. And I remember during that time, we supported the city commissioners with the election, and and it was COVID time, right? You remember all of that. And we actually did a pilot program of 17 satellite election offices. At that time, though, it was mostly in schools because the schools were closed, right? We had access to to the community schools, and we were able to just like set up shop there. So that was a really successful pilot because with a pandemic and with such a, like, it was a presidential election, such a critical election, it was important that we gave people another option as far as like not just voting on election day. And for context, Pennsylvania doesn't have early voting, so that's where the mail-in ballots come in and the satellite election offices come in. So people could go in, they could request a mail-in ballot, we print it out there, and then they fill it out there, and then their civic duty would be done. So 4 years later, was 2024, we were able, so my role in particular was to establish 10 permanent satellite election offices, right? So we saw it worked in 2020. We felt that it was really important to have access to voter services in every council district. So that was my big project. And now we do have 10 permanent satellite election offices, and people can walk in, register to vote, update any information in the system that they need to update, whether it's party, they moved addresses. And around election time, they can walk in, request their ballot, fill it out there, and turn it in. And that just, to me, that's really important because, you know, life gets busy, right? And for us to only have one day to be able to exercise, you know, our right to vote, it is not enough, right? We need to give people options, whether it's from the comfort of their home because they request a ballot, it gets mailed there, or they can just like find their nearest satellite and get their civic duty done. So my role is around managing those 10 sites. So I go all around the city all the time. And then it's also a lot of staff. I manage over 70 staff members. So it's also a lot of staff to make sure that, you know, our election operations are running.
Are there plans to expand that even further?
So there are no plans to expand that further. But the hope is that if Pennsylvania ever becomes an early voting state, we could transition those sites to be early voting sites. And the other thing we want to do is, and we're working actively on, is partnering with other city agencies and organizations that want to host events, that want to get out the word about any resources, community meetings, and things like that, because we want these spaces to be also accessible for that. Obviously, you know, not during election time, but, you know, any other time of the year, we want to be able to host those community conversations, as well as any resources that we want to just get out to the community so people can walk in, not just for voter services.
So as if your full-time job, you know, wasn't enough, you also find time to give back, to support different nonprofits. One in particular that I wanted to touch on is ALPFA Philadelphia, and also your work in the city with the city ERG or BRG, or what do you guys call it? You know, that's all about leadership and lifting people. Tell us a little bit about that and like why you do that.
Yeah, definitely. So ALPFA came into my life in, I think, around the same time, 2020. And I was tapped by the current president to serve as in community engagement role. And again, like growing up, you know, in a household where I only saw like Latinos maybe serving in like lawyer role, doctor role, right? It was really amazing to see Latinos like in corporate doing like big things. Because ALPFA is mostly corporate. We're diversifying a little more now. But that's how I got involved. And really the mission is to empower and develop Latino professionals. So I just remember also going through my career journey kind of on my own, figuring it out, right? We didn't have ChatGPT. We only had Google, but, you know, lots of information out. But still, it was not an easy process. So being part of an organization that not only supports Latinos on their career path, but also like at the student level was just amazing for me to see and then want to get involved in. So like 4 years later, I did get elected as chapter president. super unplanned. It just so happened, but it was a natural transition because I had been serving on the board for 4 years, and there was a gap. I saw an opportunity, and it has been really impactful because I think when we look at when we hear like we need to lift each other up, like ALPFA is an organization about that. We want to make sure that from the student level, students have access to internship opportunities, that they're able to land jobs even before graduation. We want to make sure that professionals, whatever level they are, that they can continue being lifted into leadership roles if that's what they want to do. If they're unhappy in their role, for them to have a community to say, hey, I want to pivot. I want to change companies. And really that community to be able to navigate your career. Because as we both know, Martin, it's like not easy sometimes, right? And sometimes we don't expect change and then we have to pivot. So we really need that community. And that's what ALPFA has been. And I continue serving. I'm passionate about the mission, and yeah, we have some exciting things this year. So
good. And it's always being serving on a board, managing people, having to not only be the vision, right, but also making sure that the team is able to like execute. What are some of the challenges that you see in working in that type of environment?
Yeah, so when you take on a board position that's a volunteer role, you are also, in charge of making sure like others that are volunteering are equally invested. And I think that in itself can be a challenge, but it's also an opportunity. And I think that sometimes people overcommit or don't realize right, how much work it is to be in a volunteer board, especially in a working board like ALPFA, where we put together so many events throughout the year. We have corporate partners, we have community partners, right? Those require a lot of attention. So I always say ALPFA is like my second full-time role because of that. But I think just anyone really interested in getting involved should make sure that they know what they're signing up for and actually like commit to what they say they're going to do. Because if we only have half of board members like putting in the work, it's not fair for the other half, and then we're not able to have like a fully functional board.
And now, moving on to sort of taking care of ourselves, because obviously having a full-time job, all these other external commitments, you also have to make sure that you take care of yourself. And also, I forgot, like family, dealing with the whole family dynamic. How do you take care of yourself?
Mm-hmm. So I've been definitely more intentional about pausing and resting and not overextending myself. And I think that like for me, it's been about like listening to my body, listening to how I'm feeling. So resting, I definitely exercise as well. And then I spend time with friends and family. I think for me, a source of joy is always family, especially like my nieces and nephews. And then friends, right? Being able to just like hang out with your friends, laugh, go have dinner, and just like be able to just turn off work, turn off, your volunteer role for a little bit. It makes a huge difference. And being conscious about that every day, because a lot of the times we wait until we're burned out because we're not doing those daily things that should be helping us maintain, and not only maintain, but like thrive every day, right? I think I had a lot of moments last year where I was burnt out and I couldn't understand why after resting the weekend, I didn't feel better, right? Well, because it was a buildup of things, right? It was a buildup of months. So now I'm more intentional about like doing that every day so that, when I do rest the weekend, I'm all set, right? Versus reaching the burnout point.
Mm-hmm. Are there specific places where you find comfort or, a way to like disconnect from work and even personal stuff?
Well, I definitely go to my sisters and my brothers in the suburbs. Like getting away from the city is always good, right? And now I have a friend that moved to Jersey, so I could run away there as well.
Right.
And then also my home, right? Being able to just like be there. And oh, the other thing I didn't mention, I love watching just like comedy shows. I think laughter is like the best, especially like after a stressful day.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm an Impractical Joker fan, so I'll put that on and then I'll be in a better mood. So yeah, things like that.
So tell us a little bit about any like exciting things that are coming up. It's a big year in the city, midterms,
Mm-hmm.
at the national level. Yeah, what are some of these exciting things that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, well, I'm definitely looking forward to our next election, which is in May. And then we have a busy summer here in Philly. I'm sure, you've heard it, but not that you've heard it. I know you've heard it. The FIFA World Cup. Yeah, this is the first time. We've heard it enough,
You might have
right?
heard something.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know. I almost like didn't want to mention it because everyone talks about it. I feel like last year was a thing. Now I'm like, all right, I know what's happening. But yeah, that's definitely something I'm looking forward to because I want to go to one of the games. And I'm also excited about all the block parties that for the America's birthday, 250th birthday. I think that's exciting. And like the Liberty Bells that are getting placed around neighborhoods. So one of them is actually getting placed outside of one of the 10 satellite election offices in District 7. So I was excited to hear that. And I'm looking forward to participating in the unveiling and the press conference. But yeah, it's going to be a busy summer in Philly for sure. And then, of course, we have our general election in November. So that's what's going on this year. Yeah, I can't think of anything else right now.
In terms of, your professional goals, like, what are you looking forward to? And also, through the other committees that you're part of.
Yeah, so this year I got involved with the Forum of Executive Women. So I'm doing their 2026 mentee program. So I'm looking forward to just like continuing to participate in that this year. We have a meeting every month, and we're essentially put in pairs and we facilitate a class for the group. And I'm actually the first with my partner. We'll be facilitating the first class tomorrow. So definitely lots of preparation between today and tomorrow for that. And so I'm looking forward to just like building relationships with these amazing women that I'm part of in this mentee program. I'm looking forward to continuing to participate. I'm part of like the women's committee for Philadelphia 250, so that's exciting as well. And I know you asked me a little earlier about the city resource group. I'm also looking forward to continuing to host meetups for Latinos that work in the city. I think it's sort of like a similar mission to ALPFA, that we want to make sure that the Latinos that are working in the city have access to opportunities, have access to pivot departments, to grow, but also how do we get more Latinos in city government and things like that. So yeah.
And, reflecting on your, education journey to now your career, like what would you say to a younger Vanessa from 10, 15 years ago?
Yeah, I would say like during those moments of doubt, during those moments of imposter syndrome, I would just tell myself it's all going to work out. Because sometimes like, you hit roadblocks. I talked to you about, my college experience, even though like it seemed like an organic, like natural, like shift, it was really hard, right? Like feeling like you were not, like I was feeling like I was not good at science. I was feeling like, just so much pressure. I'm like of letting like my parents down, letting my family down. So I would just tell myself like, keep going. Everything's going to work out as long as, you continue working hard, as long as you continue doing right. Things work out for the best.
Great. Anything else that you want to mention?
No, but thank you so much for the opportunity.
Of course. Thank you.